Yeah. And about our Seek, actually, we are into many parameters are there, but these are the three things which we are very much interested in: the career guidance, academic consultancy, and skill development, which are the need of the hour. And for schools and colleges, we offer career guidance for students to design their career path and teach them good touch and bad touch, and offer faculty development programs. And also for parents, we have art of parenting sessions and academic consultancy for management. And we have 21st century skills training too. And also we concentrate on gender sensitization. And for corporates, we have again customized program based on the needs of the company. And here where I would like to take you through a slide which is very, very important for anybody to know about, because even at the age of what we haven't understood our true potential. That is the reason we just follow someone else's dream and living in someone else's dream. So our intention is to make the child understand its dream and understand its strong potential and work towards improving that, and identifying the career path so that the child can be happy, and also the company will be happy to extract work from the person because they would have chosen the right path. So when we talk about here, you can see the age groups. At the age of 5, every child, it's a small baby age, like everybody will be pampering the child. And the child will be on the highest peak of energy and strength and capability and belief. So here at 5 years, the child gets a feel of I can attitude. Like at the age of 5, if you ask any child, like whether you can do anything, fly, jump, or anything you ask, the child will say, yes, I can, because so much of motivation is there, so much of positivity around the child, and the child feels the child can do anything. But once it enters into school, what happens is marks come into picture, and everybody compare the child's ability based on the marks. So a child is called as an intelligent child, or the child is said to be successful only if the child scores marks. So this lead to a lot of confusion in the minds of the child, and that raises to the competition, comparison, and confusion in the child mind. So from then onwards, slowly the child will lose its ability or the self confidence in its own, and it will start comparing with someone else. When you have a parent teachers meeting, the teachers will be telling only the they may mention about the positives, but they will concentrate more on the negatives, and the child will be focused to more to improve its weakness rather than improving the strengths. So thereby slowly the child will start forgetting about the strengths what it has, and even the parents will get confused as to what is to be done. So we give a right path, identifying the strengths of the child and try to improve the strengths, because each and every child is unique as how we have our fingerprint. So we have to deal with the individual child's strength, ability, interest, and then they have to go with the career. And they are into a river of education. And at the age of 22, they can say like, can I do anything? So that sort of loss in the self-confidence happens because they are into a lot of confusion as to whether they can do something, and they just follow someone else's dream rather than following their dream. So when they keep working in this way, the freshers, when they join in the job, they will not be able to sustain, because first of all, it will not be out of their passion. Sometimes it will not match with what they like, and they will not be skilled enough to compete with the expectations of the industry. So they will have a dance of life in their career from 22 years to 40 years. That is the period where you have to grow your career. But at the age of 40, then they will realize like, okay, now I have to be stable. I need to earn money, but they don't know how to do, because it is not the out of passion they have designed their career. So this is very, very essential, and they end up in a frictional employment or a frictional unemployment situation. So 18 years of education is going to become a basic foundation for your 40 years of work life. If that is going to be unplanned, then entire life is going to be really an unplanned one. So one need to have to identify the strengths of the child, and then look at the opportunities, what is happening around. We have to know about the new developments that is happening in the industry, and develop ourselves also accordingly, requirement of the industry. And then you need to prepare yourself to meet with the expectations of the future demand. So this is what we do in Seek. And many students have been benefited out of our career plan based on the child's ability. We designed the career plan, and now they are very happy and very successful. So I would like to sum up with our services of Seek, that anybody who would like to reach us to help them shape their career, they can definitely reach us. And this is what is very important. You know, you own your career. Actually, you have to plan it. You cannot live someone else's life, for which you need to know about your own self, know your personality, know your strength, know your interest and potential. So this is my YouTube channel. We have a lot of career guidance playlist in this, and lot of new technology videos updates are there. And every branch, every course updates are available, like what are the prospects of each and everything. So you can also reach us for any sort of services what you need. And with this, I will sum up with the introduction of Seek. And I would like to bring on Praveen, who is a extraordinary student. Actually, he's my student. We were together in EC department, and I taught him electronic devices and circuits. I still remember. And welcome, Praveen. Welcome for this
Thank
webinar.
you. Thank you all,
You just
good evening. Good evening. I hope you can hear me. First of
you're
all,
audible.
thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, ma'am. It's a pleasure to be talking to all the people on here. So I'll try to be as productive and fruitful with my session. I know it's a Sunday evening, so I'll try to maximize the input that I could share with all of you. So before I get into my content and slides, I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about why I actually did this. So when Madam first asked me to do this session, I was really happy to do this. It's really a privilege and pleasure to be sharing experience and thoughts with the next generation of students, which is very useful. And when I was in your shoes, I did have this thought of having somebody to mentor me and guide me. So I really felt the need to actually be doing this talk. But then I also was wondering, what kind of inspiration can I be bringing on this call in terms of what are the things that I could share. I realized that the education system has evolved a lot since I have finished my graduation. This was 14-15 years back. A lot has changed and perspectives has changed. Students have become more smarter than us. There are more resources to learn, which we didn't have a lot. So we were relying a lot on textbooks and sort of things, but now internet and a lot of technologies have evolved. A lot of learning courses, and kudos to ma'am for running the Seek organization, which also does a lot of good to students. So then I decided to actually do the talk, and one need not be an achiever to actually do these talks. So that's when which drove me to do this session, was also in the interest of sharing experiences, lessons learned, which are always useful for students. And people learn a lot from mistakes than from success stories. So again, my experiences, I'll more want to focus on the things which I would have done differently, or what I would have liked to do it differently. So that's really the perspective that I wanted to bring. I know that India, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of stress with students. The number of students that graduate every year is immense. But I think there are small nuances, different perspectives of life, which people actually forget, and also likewise parents and also faculty. In the race of life, people sometimes neglect what is more important. Is it job, getting a job, reputation in the society? So there are certain nuances which people don't take note of. So I just want to reflect some of those aspects and try to be as fruitful, and then maybe I'll take some questions later part of the session. To start with my profile, I'm an engineering graduate to start with, and like ma'am said, she was one of our faculties, a very good one. And I had a lot of help from her in terms of mentorship and guidance on how to tune. And I was equally lost. I don't know Most of you may be well structured and organized, but I was a law student when I was studying, and that's one reason why I also wanted to do this talk. And I graduated in electronics and communications engineering, and this was 14, 15 years back. So time flies. A lot of years have gone by. But after that, I had a career, and right now I'm in Germany, in Frankfurt. I work for an IT company as a principal consultant, and I've spent like 14, 15 years in the market doing different jobs. I'll come to that as necessary, and I'll also try to keep my personal profile as limited as possible, not to, because I think the focus of this session should be really students and the guidance that they should get, and less about me. So with that, I'll probably, ma'am, if you can flash the presentation, I'll quickly go over 3 slides. I'll try to keep it very simple. And I know that students are much better organized. They do a lot of workshops. They get a lot of counseling. And the messages are not very different, right? I mean, the messages are all the same. Probably I'll be repeating some of them, but apologies if I repeat some of it. But I think the first thing which I wanted to start with is to understand the different possibilities after engineering. And now, again, this may not be true for most of the students, but at least the most number of people and friends and students that I have met after inter +2, after you do your high school, the alternatives are always engineering. That's the most popular one. And people sometimes forget that there are many other possibilities to do, but I think engineering by default becomes a study and area direction to go towards. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the difference between career and job. And why is this important, and why is it important to understand this early in your life is because career and job are 2 different aspects. And a lot of people confuse career for getting a job. That's actually not true. So I've just picked some bullets from public resources in terms of how do you differentiate between career and getting a job. And I feel students actually, in the pursuit of getting a job, they misunderstand it to be career, which I also did. So after engineering, people actually wonder, when will I get a job? Will I make a career? But the 2 different things, in my opinion. So the first thing is whether you're happy with what you're doing. And at the maturity of the students in engineering, it's always not one that they would really know, will they be happy or not. So that comes by experience. And given my 15 years of career, I could recall this was a point which I didn't think of when I was applying for jobs after my engineering. So what I want to do in my life, will it make me happy? So that was never a consideration. And I request students to actually think about it. So don't get into the rush of getting a job in the market and just go blindly doing what you're offered. So take a minute to understand if that would make you happy. The second one is financial uplift, which is equally important. So people need to look after their financials, and that's an important criteria in making a career or to get a job. So financial uplift is equally important. And the third thing is, are you good at what you're getting into? So for me, I was an ECE student. I was okay-ish with my engineering subjects, but when it came to programming or coding, I wasn't great at it. So I very well knew that I wasn't good at programming, so that's not a career or a job that I would want to pursue. So I did get jobs in terms of a programmer, but I declined it. So I think I would suggest students that before you accept a job or get into a direction, consider these factors, whether you're good at what you're being offered, whether you will be happy in life doing the job. Again, because I've done this for 15 years, I can tell you that you will not enjoy working in a job which you are not happy with. So always consider these aspects, and always introspect whether you want to make a career or whether you wanted to get a job. This is equally important for faculty members as well to understand whether students need to be pushed into a direction, or should they be really looking at what really makes sense for them. So just to give you an example, because I live in Germany, the education system in Germany is slightly different. So after high school, the direction or the career in which the students go into, that's not determined by the students, and that's not determined by the students. That's actually determined by the teachers along with the parents. So someone who is not very good at a certain discipline is actually asked not to go into that discipline. This is slightly different to how things happen in India. So one of the points that I want to give away to the students in the call is think about whether you want to get a career or whether you want to get a job. So that's something which you should introspect. And a couple of other points that I've mentioned is in terms of really understanding, taking time for yourself to understand whether you want to get a career or job. So that's one aspect. And the other thing when you graduate out of college or even before that is learning and unlearning. So when I graduated and when I got into the industry, there were a lot of things that I had to unlearn and relearn. So that's one aspect which I would want to share with you all, that a lot of education that's imparted during engineering is more theoretical in nature, but when you get into the industry, a lot of it becomes obsolete because you need to really get the practical side of concepts or anything that you learn. So unlearning and relearning is a skill that is really, really important. And for students, it's really important to be able to adapt to new situation. And this becomes easy when you actually get into a career or a job which you really want to do it. That's your passion, instead of blindly getting into something without realizing whether that's the thing that you want to do or not. So unlearning and relearning is something which becomes very integral to your career after you graduate and get into a job. So that requires adaptability and flexibility in terms of learning new stuff. And this is a byproduct of having passion for what you're doing, which is why again I keep talking about whether you really have the passion to do the job and get into the direction, or you're blindly getting into for sake of others. And the other, and again, needless to say, learning is part of life. Even now, I am learning at each stage of my career, including every day. I need to learn new stuff in different perspectives. Right? It need not be in terms of study, but vocabulary, skill sets, or any sort of thing. And again, the world is changing at a rapid pace. So without learning, you would actually become absolute. So that's really important as an important factor for you to take note of. And the other thing that I wanted to reflect is in terms of taking inspiration from people next door. Again, I've heard a lot of talks where people cite examples of Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, who are really inspirational people, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, but there are equally inspirational people who are right next door. It could be our family members, our teachers, people next door, or fellow students. So take inspiration from everybody. That's equally possible. You don't have to look at people who are achievers, and not everybody is an achiever. And that's where I actually reflect that every student, every individual has a skill of their own. So nobody is a loser by default. It just the decisions and the steps that we take actually makes the person who we are in our career. And that said, the last bit which I wanted to talk about is in terms of the art of fine balancing. This is something which I have learned, which I'll come to in a minute. But the art of fine balancing is something which becomes crucial in your career when you graduate. So if you can, so these are some of the things that I wanted you to reflect on in terms of understanding the different possibilities. So don't blindly get into what is offered to you. Take time to introspect what you're good at, what will make you happy in terms of making a career, and whether there is enough financial uplift. But that said, I think priorities differ for each individual, and I wouldn't say that this is the direction or this is the set rule. via which you should proceed, but we wanted to share some of the aspects in terms of to spend enough time on understanding different possibilities, understand what are the directions that you can get into, and only after that take decisions, because I know that one wrong decision could actually lead you into a completely different direction which you may not be happy with. So now if you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So I understand that there are also faculty members who are on this call who would want to understand the skill sets or the personality traits that are useful for students. So I wanted to take some time to reflect on these personal traits and skills that are very useful for students after they graduate. So one is confidence versus being humble. Uh, and this is something which I lacked in my career when I graduated. So I was not very shy, but that said, I was also not equally confident to put myself in front of a lot of people and doing public talks. So that's something which I wasn't very good at. And I know a lot of students are much better at this. So, but I still wanted to reflect on this. And with confidence, sometimes you get arrogance and you lose empathy towards your colleagues and other people, which is why I wanted to stress on being humble. And sometimes people misunderstand confidence as not being humble. So one can actually be confident and yet be humble, which is why I reflected this in the industry, in the career. It will take you a long way if you are confident and yet you're humble. I've seen careers being destroyed simply for the sake that people in question were very confident and they mistook arrogance for confidence. Which is why I think it's important to be confident. Yet I think it's equally important to be humble if you need to grow great heights. I haven't seen any person growing to great heights if they're not humble. So that's one thing which I would actually reflect as being a trait that you should develop right in early stage of your career. The second one is stress management. When you get into the industry, when you get into your job, there are different career options. Like I've said, I've called out these three factors which could help you decide which career to opt. But if you're very ambitious, if you which is not bad and wrong, by the way, being ambitious is a good trait to have. But with that, there are a lot of expectations, and you need to be able to manage stress. And I think students in India are very good at stress management because I know the expectations that are put on them from teachers, parents, fellow students, from the society. So I know stress management is something which comes to students naturally in India. But I wanted to reflect that not everybody is born to be a Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, right? So everybody has to balance what their priorities in life are, which is why I said that career, you need to wisely decide what you want to do. And stress management is becoming very important in the current world, especially in the information technology industry, where people are put to a lot of stress in terms of job and a lot of other aspects. So that's one thing which I would request faculty members to be conscious of when they're giving sessions to students, and talk about the importance of stress management. And when you're very confident, I think you are good at managing stress. And when you're also not good at what you're doing in terms of job, I think that also results in some sort of stress. So again, the whole thing goes back to career. I don't want to repeat myself again, but pick a career where you are good at, which will make you happy, where you are able to manage stress. The next thing is setting priorities and executing them. And this is something which is very relevant now, even before you get into the industry to get a job. Setting priorities. And I know I wasn't doing this. I was lost, and I needed mentors to guide me in how this is done. And this is something which is very, very important in terms of guiding your career. So setting priorities, make this as an exercise even now when you're in your engineering studies. Set priorities. They could be small or big. And setting priorities is not the end, right? I think you need to execute them. So you need to have a plan to execute your priorities. So bring and inculcate the practice of setting priorities. That will be very useful in your life as you proceed. The next one that I wanted to reflect on is it's okay to say no. So when I was into the industry, there were a lot of instances where I was forced to do things which I didn't want to do and I didn't feel right to do them. And I was carried away by the pressure in the industry to be able to prove. So keep in mind that it's okay to say no. When you don't want to do something, it's okay to say no in a humble way with the right reasons, explaining why it's not okay to do a certain thing. So in the industry, there will be pressures, there will be expectations, there would be, I wouldn't call it as exploitations, but there's a fine line between exploiting and getting the job done and work distribution. So where you feel it's not appropriate, it's okay to say no. And this is also something which you could learn right from now. When your parents are pushing into to push you into something, I think it's okay to say no with the right argument saying. So I know a lot of people, like I've said, that they're forced into careers, they're forced into jobs despite not liking it. After coming into my career, I realized that there are thousands of alternatives other than engineering and technology. I know a lot of people who have actually done their engineering but decided to do a completely different profession in terms of arts, literature, like civil services, for example. So it's okay to say no to your parents and your friends when you have the right arguments and when you know the reasons that that's not the right thing to do. And work-life balance, again, this may not be very relevant to you at the moment, but work-life balance is very important in the industry. Otherwise you would the life will be disaster. So I think that's something which you will learn, but just keep note of work-life balance as you get into the job market. And one of the other aspects which is really becoming pivotal to a lot of organization is corporate values and corporate social responsibility and being respectful towards others. So companies would bear incompetency, they would bear people not delivering on their projects. But what they cannot bear and what they have zero tolerance towards is corporate values in terms of not being polite, not being respectful. I think there is zero tolerance to people in terms of not following the corporate values, and this could be teamwork, being respectful. And I think if you're following what's happening across the world, being respectful to fellow people, fellow human beings is not a grade to ask about. And there's zero tolerance to this in the corporate world. So that's something which is very important. Also, irrespective of the corporate values, right? I think even in the society, it is an important direction to follow in terms of being respectful to others and corporate social responsibility. So being able to give something back to the society is something which all corporates actually value much higher than ability to get the job done. So last but not the least, some other skills. Again, I didn't put this at the top of the list because I talked about learning and unlearning. So when you get into the industry, companies actually offer training. So when I finished my graduation, I was put through a rigorous training for 6 months, where I was taught communication skills, art of the Microsoft Office, a lot of programming languages, C, C++, Java, all that. So I was really wondering, like, while I was learning a lot of stuff, will I be really using all of that? And the answer was no. So I wasn't using a lot of what I was trained at in the company, but you will be given this education. So these are important skills to have, but I think even more bigger lifesaver, what turned out to be was MS Office. So being able to work with MS Excel, being able to work with PowerPoint presentations, being able to work with Microsoft Word. So that actually became a lifesaver for me in one part of my career, which yeah, I never thought that this would be the case when I was in engineering. So I was always running after these big complex programming languages, Java, C++, and whatnot, VBA. But I realized that I wasn't using most of it. But the lifesaver for me was Microsoft Office, which a lot of people, yeah, I don't know if they take equal importance, but it's something which is basic. And actually, I think in the current curriculum, this is actually gaining traction. When I was studying, there weren't a lot of resources to learn these basic stuff. But now I think the curriculum has changed, and Microsoft Office, the basics of Windows, is becoming fundamental. I would expect this is already the case with most of you. And one other skill that is very important is the art of selling your work. So in the corporate world, there will be competition. There'll be people who would want to compete. It's just the nature of the people, nothing wrong against it. But when you have done certain work, you need to be able to sell that work towards your superiors, towards your colleagues. A good example of this is when you do your project, right? Your final engineering project. I think I know a lot of students put in a lot of hard work into it, but some people actually fail to explain or sell their work towards the faculty members when they actually present their work. So art of selling your work is very critical. It should be fundamental in our curriculum. Students should be taught that it's just not writing responses, but you also need to be able to sell your work. If you have done the work right, if you know what you have done, you will be able to do this. But it's very important, the art of selling your work. So these are some of the personal traits which I think are very useful, and I hope most of you are following this, and also the faculty probably is also doing this. So just wanted to reflect on this. And in terms of piece of advice, if you could go to the last slide. So some piece of advice that I wanted to share with you guys is, and again, this is coming from my experience. There is no engineering aspect to this. There's little to do with what career you choose or what education you're getting into. But these are very basic ones. And as I say that education has some importance, some relevance in terms of how your career and your after graduation life will transpire. But more importantly, there are things which are less relevant with education, but more in terms of personal traits and qualities which will actually drive your life afterwards. So one is not to hang on to your past. I've seen a lot of people who have failed and who hung up on their past and they didn't progress further. So just to give you an example, in my instance, right? So I after my 10th, I was preparing for IIT, and I didn't crack the IIT JEE exam, so I was depressed. I felt like I actually wasted a couple of months of my life just being depressed and not doing anything further. I mean, it's okay to feel sad if you fail, but my suggestion is that you cannot hang on to your past. You need to think of present and future. Past could serve as a very good experience in terms of what not to do or what things could have done differently. But my piece of advice is not to hang on to your past. Think of present, think of future. Right now, I think you have only spent like quarter of your life, going by in the Indian standards. So there's a whole life, a larger life to live. But what drives your rest of your life is really things you do, practices you take up now, qualities that you inculcate now. So it is a very important phase of your career, as ma'am explained, taking a diagnosis of career and lifespan. But don't hang on to your past. Move away from failures. Think of future. Think of present. Work harder to achieve your goals than to hang on to your past. And one other piece of advice, just sticking on the hang on to your past, is I've also seen people who were overwhelmed with success that they just forget about the future. So I've also seen people, and again, quoting my own example, right? So after 10th, I did get good grades, and I was one of the rankers in the school. And this was a school which had like 120 students, and I was a ranker among 120 students. But when I went on into the market to pursue IIT JEE, I was just shocked by the immense talent. So I was sort of taken back at the comforts. I was sort of arrogance, and yeah, you could call it as arrogance, and the idea of knowing everything, which is not always the case. So don't hang on to your past. If you had a failure, get over it. If you had a success, just forget it and move on from there. So don't hang on to your past. Think of present and future, and what make the most of the time that it is now. Like I've said, this is a quarter of your whole lifespan, but this exactly drives and shapes you for the rest of your life. So make the most of the time right now. Do the right thing. And that said, I'm not saying that you need to compromise on your Sunday movie time, or time where you have to spend with your friends. It's all good. It's all fine, and you need to do this. You need to relax your mind, but equally set your priorities right. You will actually know what are your priorities, and actually called on the art of fine balancing. So the art of fine balancing comes everywhere in our life. So don't be an extremist. So don't spend the whole day with your friends, and equally don't spend the whole days just reading books and just being in front of your computer. So you need to have a fine balance between how you manage your life. And the third bullet there, introspect, have your me time. This is very, very important. And I think if there's a couple of points that I want you to take away from this session is this particular bullet, which is introspect and have your me time. uh, People are so busy in their lives in doing what they're doing that they don't take time to introspect what they have done, whether that's going in the right direction in terms of their career, what are their goals. So I actually suggest all the students to actually take some me time once a week, once 2 weeks, once in a month. Spend a time where you're alone. Think of what you have done in the past days, whether that's taking you in the right direction or whether that's not taking you in the right direction. Reflect on what are your goals. And a lot of times the goals have to be course corrected. So when I was young, I wanted to be a pilot. Then after 10th, I realized that's something which I'll never have. So I course corrected myself, saying that this is not a career or a goal that I could set. And I course corrected into something more tangible and something more realistic. And then after, when I was in engineering, I wanted to be a scientist. Again, after I graduated, I took my first job in an IT company, and then I learned that okay, being a scientist is not my goal. So take time to introspect, spend some time, alone time, think what you want from your life, whether what you're doing is taking you in that direction or not. Again, I'm not saying that you need to have ambitious goals that I want to be the
Yeah,
CEO or something, but
उन
have
लोगों ने अंदर बैठा
something,
बोला
something which is realistic and tangible. So take time to introspect what you have done, whether what you're doing is taking you in the right direction or not. Again, like I've said, so one of this one student could actually say that I want to be an actor. It's not wrong to be dreaming of being an actor, but the actions that you're taking, is it taking you in the right direction? If not, what else should you be doing? So introspect, have your me time once a week, once a month, have your alone time, think what you're doing, is it taking you in the right direction? Like I've said, you've only spent quarter of your life, but the actions that you do now will actually shape rest of your life. And the other bullet is being humble and kind to others. There's no joy in enjoying others' miseries. The advent of social media, social platforming sites, trolling, mocking, roasting, these have become a part of culture, and I see this very often in the society, which is actually not good. And I think you are students, you will form the next generation of our country. So I think I really request you all to be humble, be kind to others. There's no joy in looking at others' miseries. If you're able to help, help them. but don't take fun, because you will at some stage of your life will actually fall into those shoes where people make fun of you. And what I've realized is the more you do good, the better, and the more it actually reciprocates in your life in at a different point in time. Be humble and kind towards others. Be positive. You're just starting your journey. There's a whole big life that's waiting for you. It will be very positive. So be positive all the time. You haven't lost anything. You have a very, very long career and life to spend. And priorities change in life. Education is not your life. The marks or the grades that you get in BTech is not your life. That doesn't define who you will be in your life. So be positive. And again, the last bit is giving back to society. You are the students. You are well read. You are engineering graduates. So a section of the Indian society who are well read and who could actually be the backbone of our country. So always think of how you could give back into society where possible. And my last advice is don't take stress. Okay, there's no reason to make your life difficult. I actually, whenever I get stressed, what I think of is that the moment that I'm living is really minuscule when I compare it to the whole lifespan that I have. So there's no reason to stress. There will be ups and downs, but you will have to learn how to deal with your low points in your life. There's nothing good happens when you take stress, but bad phases pass by. I had bad phases, I had good phases, but nothing really lasted. So you'll have bad phases, you'll have good phases. You need to learn to deal with both good and bad. And exactly as I've said, don't take stress. When you're doing the right thing, your life and career will be good. So you don't have to take stress about anything. The time taken could be longer or shorter. That might change, but when you've done the right things, there's nothing to be afraid of. So these are some of the piece of advices, because I want to really take this opportunity to share some thoughts with students who will come out to be the future of our nation. So thank you very much for having patience to go through my thoughts. Now I'm actually okay to take some questions. I don't know how much, if I've taken more time.
No.
But
Thank you,
yeah.
Praveen. That was a wonderful. I'm really surprised to see you after 15 years that you can talk so much, because I've always seen you as a very, very silent, calm boy. And I do remember, I don't know how much you remember, we used to practice how to present the answer scripts with
Yes,
underlining the important points. I used to have your answer sheet as a model for all my other. Yes, all your juniors
absolutely.
had just followed your answer script. You're such a systematic person, a methodical person, and you were so calm. I just can't imagine that Praveen is able to express so much. You've been always smiling. I remember your smile as my student, and I'm feeling very, very proud that you're so matured. Even the advices what you have given is out of your personal experience, and happy that you have experienced so much.
Yes, absolutely. Ma'am, if I can share some other thing, I think one of the things
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people also forget is the importance of teachers in life. And yeah, again, ma'am was one of the first mentors who was always encouraging me. It gave me confidence. So I think also advice to all the faculty members is that no student is actually incapable, right? It's just that they need to be put into the right direction to do things. And actually, I know when I was doing my engineering, like I've said, I wanted to be a scientist. But in third year, I got campus placements, which I took, and I was doing my job after my graduation. But still, I had my dream of being a scientist, and I actually gave the interview in ISRO. And you won't believe, but I was selected as a scientist C back then. And actually the age and the maturity and the priorities take a toll on you, that you don't understand what is right and what is not. So I actually declined the offer of being a scientist, which I regret all my life. And I'm calling out this because, which is why I called on the career versus job option. Will it make you happy? So there are shorter gains which students look after, and that's sheerly because of the age and the immaturity that they have. But spend some time to introspect what is right for you. Like I've said, I regret all my life of not having joined ISRO and being held up in a private organization, doing something which I'm good at, which is finally good as well. But do I really enjoy it? Probably I would have liked to be a scientist in ISRO. So which is why I always call out to students and advise them that introspect, take time to understand what is right for you. Will you really be happy in what you're doing? And it's okay to say no if there is force from other stakeholders.
Yeah. Participants, can we have your questions now? You can one by one unmute and ask your questions. Any
Hi.
questions?
Yeah, this is Vikram here, ma'am. So, so Praveen, this was really great session. I really love this. It was pretty much simple and like clean, and I love the point when you touched upon career as a job. And I really liked the way you expressed it. It was point blank and clean, and we could understand it easily. So my question is like, you have seen both Indian market and you're working in Germany. So you would have seen engineers and various people in your career. So what do you see is like approach based on an engineer from India and an engineer from abroad, any country for that matter? You see any advantage that we have this approach, or like this is the best thing which you see in India, or else you see a gap that which we need to have it in our mind so that we can compete in this international market? Maybe some approach base.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll call out some of the cultural things that I've noticed. The Western market and Germany is really special in some aspects. So you have the German market, you have UK, for example, and then you have US market. So there are slight cultural differences in the way corporates actually perceive candidates when you go there. So one observation is that in Indian market, at least I don't know how this is now, but back when I was studying, the relevance for practicality of studies was slightly underrated compared to the theoretical study and the focus on getting good grades. So that was always the intention. So even I'm no exception. I was also studying to get good grades, and understanding every bit was secondary. But in the US market and in the Western market and in Germany especially, there's a lot of focus on practicality of learning something. And in German education, people don't call it as teaching; it's actually more learning. So people are told how to learn practical skills. And I don't know if you have picked it, but in Germany, students' career are determined by teachers. Teachers look at the skills of the students. They actually say that this student needs to go into the direction of becoming an artist. This student should go into the direction of becoming a carpenter. And there's dignity of labor. Nobody would actually feel shy of doing. And again, there is a big disparity in terms of what job you do. But one observation is that the Western markets actually expect you to have practical knowledge, which is not relatively underrated compared to the grade system that we have in India. But if you're competing in India, if you're getting jobs in India, I think that is equally important. But I think the other aspect is actually to learn practical essence, the foundations, the basics, the concepts, the applicability. So how would you apply a certain concept in a live use case? I think that's the direction where students in Western countries are taught towards. And one other very, very big difference that I noticed. So after my engineering, I did my resume. I applied for the job. I got the job. I did for 18 months. And after 18 months, I was asked to come to Germany. And I was coming, and I had to do an interview, and I had a CV. So I didn't update my CV, which I did in my engineering. I presented the same CV to people in Germany. And that CV typically, I don't know about you guys, you're probably much structured and much better, but my CV back then had every possible programming language that could be there in the market: C, C++, Java, HTML, whatnot, everything. And this always worked in India. So I presented the same CV, and the guy in Germany was really shocked to see that I had so much experience in languages. So in Western countries, whatever you put in a CV, they expect you to be pitch perfect. They expect you to be like absolutely perfect at what you're putting in your CV. So if you put a Java, they expect you to know like 200% of Java. You should be able to code immediately, which is slightly different from India. And again, I'm no exception. Like I've said, we put a lot of things, and even the expectation from the company's HR is that, yeah, probably the guy knows half of what they've put in the CV. But in Western countries, they expect whatever you put in your CV that you are pitch perfect. It could be limited, but they actually appreciate specialists than generalists. And I think in India, the trend is more to look at candidates who are generalists, who could be trained and put into doing anything. But in Europe, they really look for generalists. So I had some difficulties to understand this. But eventually I learned that in European countries, people actually look for a specialist. So whatever direction that you're getting into, right, try to be a specialist in a certain theme. And now there is a trend of artificial intelligence, business automations. There's a lot of things, right, which are coming out in the market. And there are also discussions on how the technology is going to make the human workforce obsolete. So it's really important to be a specialist in at least one or two directions than being a generalist. I think generalist is also not bad. You can be a generalist, but you need to have a couple of skills where you know in and out. That's really, really important. And one other cultural difference, if I could reflect on, is also the communication aspect. I talked about selling, being able, the art of selling your work. So especially in English markets, US, UK, you need to be able to articulate yourself. Communication skills plays a big role. Especially on the US market, you need to be able to exaggerate things. I mean, I could be wrong with certain things, but you should be able to articulate things. You should be able to sell yourself. That's something which people look at. I think if you're not able to sell yourself, the expectation is that you will not be able to sell the company that you're working for. So that's one other thing which I've noted in the US and UK markets, which is very, very important: the art of selling your work, and try to be a specialist in at least a couple of skills or technologies that you wanted to get into.
Thanks, Praveen. Yeah, that was really lovely. I agree with the CV again. We need to be the subject model experts coming from the industry. Yeah. Thanks for the session.
You're welcome.
Praveen, Vikram is also my student.
Okay. Hi, Vikram.
Okay, and he's an expert in embedded systems. And
Okay,
we had a
that's very
webinar
good.
2 days back with Vikram. He talked about the art of being an engineer.
Good.
He was an entrepreneur even before he joined engineering. He was into
Okay.
robotics.
So like I've said, right, there are a lot of achievers and a lot of good students. But I think there are small nuances, small things which people don't grasp, which comes by experience, which is why I wanted to share some of my thoughts.
True.
So what do you think, Praveen, like, what is that the students have to do when they choose their branch? Suppose if they pick up engineering, how do they choose their branch?
Just before getting into engineering?
Yeah, yeah, true. How did you choose ECE?
Yeah, okay. So why I chose ECE was because my father forced me into it.
That's what is
and
happening.
Yeah, and back then, I don't know how this cultivates in the society, but there was this thought that, okay, ECE is the best engineering degree, and everybody would say that without explaining why. To be honest, actually, like I've said, I was pursuing IIT JEE, and I had little focus on what I would do next. I think my immediate short-term goal was to get into IIT, which I didn't, but I wasn't disheartened. But I think the next course was actually to get into engineering, and like I've said, scientist towards technology. I had some passion towards it, so I knew that I want to be an engineer. But the field, I wasn't very convinced. So there was some advice from my parents, from the society. But then I also knew I was looking at my alternatives. So I had chemical, electrical engineering, then instrumentation, then I had architecture. So what I did was I actually worked out by crossing out what I was not good at. So I couldn't be an architect because I was very bad at painting and even drawing lines. So I would never become an architect. And likewise, electrical and chemical engineering, there were certain reasons why I actually ruled it out. So what I did was I actually went more in the way of ruling out what I cannot be. So instead of looking at what I was good at, I actually ruled out what I'm really bad at. And then ECE seemed like something which I would be passionate about, and I actually I'm really happy that I took ECE as a degree, because that really worked out for me. So in my case, I just ruled out what I was not good at.
Okay. So I think a lot of students are there as attendees. I request you all to ask your doubts. It's very rare to get a person like Praveen here to clarify your doubts. He'll definitely give very good advice to you. I request the students to unmute yourself one by one and ask your doubts. We can have a crisp answers.
And again, don't feel shy, right? I'm someone who is more advocating for people who are backbenchers, who are not good at studies. I don't like to talk to people who are achievers and who are toppers of the batch, because I think those are the people who really need guidance. Like I've said, nobody is incapable. It's just that they need to have the right priorities and right mindset. So don't feel shy. Yeah, shoot questions.
You remember Subramaniam, Praveen? He was so
of course.
happy to see that you're going to be in the webinar today.
Yeah, everybody is. I thought there wouldn't be a lot of publicity, but everybody knows this now.
He saw that in Facebook. Even I was surprised when he asked me. Yes, audience, please come on, shoot questions. I want Praveen to answer. Vikram, you have any more questions?
Yeah. Or why don't students just tell me whatever I said makes sense and doesn't make sense? I think it's also equally important to understand from the students, because I know that 15 years have passed since I have graduated, and a lot has changed. And a lot of what I've talked could also be absolute. So I also would encourage students to share their thoughts. I mean, if something what I've said doesn't make Sorry, I think I was on mute for some time. I don't know if you have heard me, but I was actually inviting students to share their views. If you think or you disagree with any of the things.
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay.
You are audible. Students or any professors in the group, you can ask some questions.
Actually, ma'am, I don't know if I didn't spend some time on certain aspects, which is the life in a corporate and how to do interviews and CVs. Only now I actually think that it would be good to do one more session, which is even more relevant on how to do interviews, how to prepare CVs.
Exactly.
So yeah, would be okay to come back and share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, we'll have it next week. Vikram, are you there?
I'm here, ma'am. I think I have asked my question.
And yeah, you can ask on behalf of the students.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Please.
Yes. Myself, Dr. Vijay Krishna from Andhra Pradesh. I'm Associate Professor of Bapatla Engineering College. Yes,
Hi.
myself, Vijay, sir. Praveen sir, hi, excellent lecture. Sir. Today we have wonders. You can see that we will take a 40 to 45 minutes. We're really very glad to have a session, sir. Even though
Thank you.
some of the students, I'm in the field of around 15 to 20 years in this field, the teaching field. So that my question is that what is the new challenges in electrical engineers towards the UN states like Germany and then United States like that? What are the new challenges for electrical engineers?
Okay. Sure. I'll try to give as much information I have. So
Yeah, sure.
electrical engineers, definitely. I think the industry as such is evolving very rapidly. The technologies are evolving very rapidly. So recently, SpaceX shot a rocket to space, and there was a lot of news around this. So I don't know if you have noticed a big change which I noticed was, or this was actually flying in LinkedIn. The structure of the cockpit or the space where the pilots were sitting, it has completely transformed from earlier ages. So there was the previous shuttles which went into the space, the look and feel of it. There are a lot of knobs and a lot of buttons to press. But now, if you see the SpaceX UI and the screens, it's very simplified, and that is actually a very good reflection of how technology has advanced in terms of electrical and electronic engineering. So simplification is the key, automation is the key. Machine learning is also which is very relevant for electrical engineers. So electrical engineers, where you were working with machines, you were looking at the throughput output. Again, I'm not an EC expert, and again, I've forgotten a lot of engineering stuff, but most of you would have worked on machines, how to increase the throughput. But now people are looking much more and beyond that in terms of how to simplify things. How do we automate? So automation is actually now become even old. I think now it's not even something which is new. Automation is by default expected from each and every industry. So there is Industry 4.0, which I'm sure you would know, Internet of Things, and being able to connect different things is actually forming the bigger picture. So back in those days, our engineering degree, especially when we were doing different disciplines, we were looking at each different field separately. So space engineering, we were looking only at space, or I remember very few concepts in terms of satellite, uplink, downlink, and all that. But now it has come to a stage where everything needs to be looked at from front to back. So you cannot look at a solution, you cannot look at a problem and just say that, okay, this is a machine, this has this problem, I'll just fix it. You cannot think in that direction. You need to think from front to back in terms of what is this machine doing, what is the input, what is the output, what happens based on the output. So you need to look at the front to back, and the focus is more on simplification, automation. So Industry 4.0 with Internet of Things and a lot of other new technologies that are coming in. I feel that students need to learn about these things, and just not the buzzwords, right? When I say students learning this Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, automation skills, I'm not talking about just being able to talk about these topics for 5 minutes. I think it's more about the practical knowledge, being able to understand the problem front to back, and also being able to break down the problem into smaller chunks. So in terms of electrical engineering, I think it's a very booming field, where, I mean, Tesla, right, like all the miracles, that things which we haven't even thought of, like driverless cars. And at one stage in my career, I was always thinking that maybe driverless cars is more computer science relevant. But actually, no, it has a lot to do also with electrical engineering, electronics engineering. And this is where I'm saying that people need to be able to look at things front to back, So just not a simple embedded cell or embedded chip, but completely front to back. What are the use cases? Where will it be applied? And again, based on the perspective or the use case that you have, certain things, certain machines could do different purposes. So that needs to be looked at. Again, practicality is one in terms of electrical engineering, Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, automation. And again, don't learn the buzzwords. Try to understand the concepts, try to understand the use cases, go in depth, be able to, again, you don't have to be a generalist, right? Really focus on certain things like the sensors that are used in cars. And there are also new technologies that are coming from the chemical industry, where they're looking at materials which will withstand. So for example, Tesla came out with a truck, right? The new version of Cybertruck, where the windows were tested and how strong they were. So nowadays, engineering is no longer a single branch. It needs to be looked at front to back, and you need to be able to join different concepts. So you cannot read a concept just for sake of concept, so it will work in your exams. But when you go out in the market, you need to understand this concept front to back, link it to the use cases, understand the implications of it, and the purposes in all different directions. So I don't know, I gave a very long answer, but
it needs to be cross-functional actually.
Yes, sir.
Engineering itself is one, and we need to think of other areas where engineers can work, because engineers cannot be again classified as electrical, electronic, mechanical, civil and all. They are all one now, one entity, and how engineers will be helping the other areas, careers. See, you have a lot of solar cars coming in, and electric cars are there. As he said, IoT, you have a lot of scope for sensors, and wherever you have control systems, you have electrical job opportunity. Enormous opportunity is there. Without energy, without electrical power, nobody can survive. So even in COVID situation, we should be thanking the engineers who are behind, who are not coming in front and getting the appreciation or applaud from any public. But hidden way, they are doing a lot of things throughout the world.
Yeah, and just to reflect one small point, right? I've seen a post 1 month back. You would all know Elon Musk. He is an achiever in terms of Tesla, SpaceX, whatnot, everything. So he published a job posting, right? So he published a job posting saying that he wants someone to work with him. He doesn't care about the degree. He doesn't care about what he studied. He had like 3 or 4 skill sets, and he said, "You are a master at this. Send me an email." So that's the expectations that's there from engineers in terms of how good you have to be at your skills. I think you cannot be generalist in the current age.
Yeah. Thank you, Praveen. Really, it's great. And thank you,
sir. Thank you, sir.
team. Yes, it's a really great session, madam. Yeah, could you have one more question, ma'am? For engineering,
yes, sir. Sure.
Yes, for engineering students, which type of career guidance course would be suggestible, ma'am?
Which type of
career guidance things will be suggestible? Career guidance course, like there for campus interviews, or it means that they are for abroad. The way what we are going to build up the career means which type they are going to suggest, or which type they are going to choose.
Lot of noise, sir. Unable to hear what you're talking. Only lot of noise.
Oh, sorry. 1 second. Yeah, ma'am. While they're in career, means the engineering final year students, which type of careers they have to be choosable, or means career guidance programs, which type they are going to adaptable?
Sir, I strongly feel if they go with a mass career guidance, it will not help them, because people will talk about all the technologies, and they cannot just like that choose because someone else is choosing that or someone else is teaching. They should see what is their ability, what is their strength, what they like, and in which they will be better off. And first, self-analysis of the student is very much required, and then they have to align that with the jobs which are available. With that, they have to enhance their skill. They need to design a path first of all.
Yes, ma'am. I'm asking that present in a competitive world, where they have to get ready to be competitive. It means that anything they are.
First, they should know what they are, what they possess. Like if somebody is interested in something, they need to know about it. Then only they can excel in that.
Yes.
So self-analysis is required, or we do a psychometric analysis where we can also guide them based on their strengths, abilities, everything can be extracted, and that will exactly design them the career which will be suitable for them and which will make them happy in their career. They can also reach us.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. Praveen, sir. Bye. Yes. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, Praveen, I think they're all hesitant. We'll have another session, as you said, how to prepare for interview, how to prepare their CV, and some more guidelines. We'll work it out, and we'll see how it can. I can also take some feedback from the students as to what they may expect from our session. That would be more tailor-made, right?
Sure.
And
again,
thank you so much for your time, Praveen. I don't know how to thank you. I'm really happy about your presence today. Feeling
but
very
again,
proud
for
of
those
you.
students who are shy, right? They could also, I can give you my email address. If people are shy to ask questions in a forum, they could also contact me. I think, I would be more than happy to connect one-to-one if that helps.
Yeah, give me your email ID or type it in the chat box.
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you after this session, maybe.
No, it is in the chat box.
Okay,
yeah. Immediately you can send it.
Okay, fine. So that's my email address. So yeah, anyone can write to me.
Praveen Koniti at email.
May take some time. Yes, it's email. Yes. So I may take time, but I'll definitely come back.
That's great, Praveen. Really, the students are really lucky to have your email ID.
I don't think so. Like
doubts clarified.
Yeah, like I've said, I'm just reflecting on what I called out, right? Giving back to the society and helping where we have come from. So that's a responsibility to have.
Thank you so much, and we will meet soon. And for the participants, we have posted the feedback link, and it will be alive till 6 o'clock. And kindly give your feedback, and we'll send you the e-certificate. And please wait for our next session. I mean, it will be on Wednesday. We are going to have it on entrepreneurship from a leading entrepreneur who will also be giving suggestions on funding. He will be supporting also few people. So let us wait for the session on Wednesday. Thank you so much for all the participants. Thank you, Praveen, and we'll meet soon. Thank you all.
Yeah, everyone have a nice Sunday, whatever is left. I hope I haven't ruined your Sunday. Thank you very much, everyone.
It was a good session. Yeah, thank you.
Praveen. Yeah. And stay safe, everyone. Take care.
Yeah, stay safe.
Thank
God
you all.
bless
Bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.